Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Diane Donaldson and I'll be chairing this hearing of the Subcommittee B of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee of Birmingham City Council. Before we start, can you all please mute your microphones for the moment in order to improve the sound quality whilst I outline the procedure. Can you also please turn off your cameras with the exception of committee members unless you're the person speaking. This is to reduce bandwidth. Committee members will have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. Could everyone attending today's meeting please put their mobile phones on silent and ensure that they are situated in a room or environment which is free from distractions or any unnecessary noise emanating from radios, TVs, etc. Thank you for that. I'm speaking slowly and clearly so everyone can follow. It is vitally important, for what I hope are obvious reasons, that those attending the meeting and making representations are able to hear me and my members of my subcommittee and officers. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of meetings. I also confirm this is a public meeting and is therefore being live streamed on the City Council's website in order that the general public can view it. I advise that this is a public meeting. It will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast by the Council's meeting YouTube site via the link in the agenda, and that members of the press public may take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Apologies was submitted on behalf of Councillor Hicks and Councillor Locke was a nominated substitute member. Can I welcome you to this hearing for an application in respect of Pizza Go-Go, 309 Foxhollies Road, Acox Green, Birmingham, B27 7PS. I'll begin with some introductions. As stated previously, I'm Councillor Diane Donaldson and I'm chairing this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. With me are other members of the subcommittee, Councillors Mike Sharp and Mary Locke. Also present in the meeting are the following officers: Licensing Officer Bapindra Nandra.
Afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Committee Manager, Meeting Manager Katie Townsend.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Committee Lawyer Joanne Swampillai.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Could I ask all parties to identify themselves, please? Firstly, the applicant.
It's Robert Jordan, representative of the applicant. Robert Jordan from PR Retail Consultants. I'm not sure the applicant can join us. We seem to have lost contact. He's in Afghanistan and we did have contact. He seems to have gone. So I'm not sure if he's managed to log in.
Okay, we'll give him some time to join the meeting. And next, those making representations. Firstly, Environmental Health Officer, Peter Brown.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Peter Brown and I'm representing Environmental Health this afternoon.
Then secondly, Councillor Roger Harmer.
Councillor Roger Harmer, Acox Green Ward representative.
Thank you. I don't believe we have Councillors Zafar Iqbal and Councillor John O'Shea.
Good afternoon, Chair. Councillor John O'Shea, Acox Green Ward.
Good afternoon. Could I ask if any persons making representations wishes to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing? No, I don't believe so. I will assume that all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules set out in the notice of today's hearing. Please note that given the nature of today's proceedings, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that this meeting is taking place online, but wish to assure you all that any such amendments will not impact on the party's right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams to communicate. One of the icons on your toolbar is a speech bubble. Click the speech bubble to go into chat. If you do not have access to the chat function for any reason, please use the raise a hand function to indicate you wish to speak. That button is usually fourth from the right on the toolbar. You can also, of course, indicate verbally that you wish to speak at the appropriate time. Can you all confirm that you have access to the chat facility by typing your own name now? Officers will also type their job title. The meeting will not proceed until you have all done so.
I think that's everyone, Chair.
Thank you, Katie.
We're
Please
just on
keep-
the dialing function.
Sorry?
We're just in the dialing function, not on Teams.
Okay. Okay, so please keep this chat column open for the entire duration of the meeting in order that everyone can follow the messages being posted in chat. If any participant has dialed in on an audio telephone rather than Microsoft Teams, please speak now to confirm that you can hear and be heard.
Yes, Robert Jordan, PR Retail, we can hear clearly.
Excellent, thank you. With the exception of the subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you're the person speaking. If there are problems with bandwidth which cause difficulties with sound, I may, in my discretion, ask everyone to turn their cameras off in order that the meeting can proceed with everyone able to hear and be heard. Does anyone wish to make any preliminary points at this stage? If so, please indicate that you wish to raise a point by typing speak into the chat function or using the raise a hand function now.
Yes, we've got a preliminary point to raise. Robert, PR Retail. Have been in contact with my client, and we have had, chats, etc. But he's lost communication. He's in Afghanistan at the moment, we understand, but we have all last week been speaking and talking. But of course, today seems to, I don't know whether he's managed to get in, but it appears that I've not been able to contact him all morning today. So be up to the committee to decide whether this proceeds or not. We're not asking for an adjournment, but whether you're happy or whether you need to hear from the applicant in person. So we leave it with the committee to decide on whether it should be adjourned or whether we carry on.
Right. We'll move into private session and I'll speak to the committee and see what their views
Chair,
are.
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Chair.
Yeah.
Could those making objections just give their views if they've got anything to say? Thank you.
No, it doesn't seem as if there are any objections.
Peter Brown just
Peter
put
Brown
his
is
camera
typing.
on. Mr. Brown, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So I mean, environmental health, after some discussion, have an objection to the licence as it stands, the application as it stands. I thought, in view of this current objection, that it was only to do with whether it should be postponed or not. So I apologise if I've misunderstood that. But we do have an objection to the licence application as it currently stands. Yes.
This seems to be a new objection that we've not heard of.
Well, I first objected to this. I was it came to us as a consultation in the normal way, and after looking at the application, I objected. This was some weeks ago now, maybe 2-3
This
weeks.
is not a new objection. Sorry, my
No.
misunderstanding. Do apologise.
No problem.
Councillor O'Shea has a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, whether you're asking for comments about whether there should be an adjournment or broader comments.
It's about an adjournment.
Okay, then I have no view on whether that's entirely for the committee to decide. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Harmer.
Councillor
And
Harmer.
Chair.
Councillor Harmer. No, Councillor Harmer has no problem with carrying on. We'll go into private session. I'll take the views of the committee. Good afternoon, and this is resuming the live stream. Thank you. I'll now briefly outline the procedure which we're following at today's hearing. Firstly, the licence officer, Apindra Nandra, will present the report. Then the applicant and their representative will be asked to present their case. We're asking if this could be kept to approximately 20 minutes. Then those making representations will be invited to make their case. Again, approximately 20 minutes will be allowed for this part of the hearing. You can ask all parties to speak as slowly and as clearly as they possibly can, because the officers are taking notes by hand for the minutes. And the meeting is also being live streamed on the City Council's website. If at any time it is somebody else's turn to speak, please mute your microphone and use the chat function to communicate if necessary. Please note that members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but will try to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination will be by the applicant, and those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Where questions are raised by members of the subcommittee or those present, please signify this using the chat facility set out on the right-hand side of the screen you are viewing this meeting on. The meeting manager will alert me if I do not notice messages in the chat. I will determine verbally or in writing on the chat facility the order in which questions are dealt with. Additionally, you may also speak to notify a question or point verbally in the usual way at the appropriate point. So at any point in the meeting, if you wish to speak, please type the word speak into the chat function, and the meeting manager will ensure that we come to you at the appropriate moment. If at any point you cannot hear or having problems with your internet connection, please use the chat facility to alert the meeting manager. The chair will then ask the person speaking to repeat what they have just said. It is therefore important that you use the chat function as soon as you're unable to hear the person speaking. It may well be there is a problem caused by people still having their microphones or cameras on, which creates interference. So I will remind everyone to please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras when you are not the person speaking. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice? At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in this meeting whilst members and the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams.
Just to interrupt, Chair, just to confirm, the decision that you made when we retired just now, this might be an appropriate moment to confirm that your decision is you're happy to proceed with the hearing.
Yeah, we're happy to proceed with the hearing. And so we're happy to proceed with this hearing, even though the applicant is not here. Please note. Okay, let me resume to where I was. So members of the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams. We will then return to this meeting and continue. Please note, if at any time the live stream being broadcast on the City Council's website fails, I may ask you to mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time this meeting goes into private session, the meeting manager will pause the live stream. Once the private part of the meeting is over, I will ask the meeting manager to confirm that the live stream has resumed before we continue. At the conclusion of the hearing, I will invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. Can I stress that no decision will be taken until all the evidence has been heard? At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from this meeting in order to determine the decision. They will go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that members need to clarify any point, you'll be telephoned by the meeting manager. The members will then make their decision. Notification of the determination of the application will be sent out to all parties within 5 working days. I hope that's reasonably straightforward. So with that, can I ask Licensing Officer Bapinda Nandra to present the report, please, as slowly and clearly as you can, please.
Thank you, Chair. Rokhan Shirzad applied on the 16th of August 2021 for the grant of a premises licence for Pizza Go-Go 309 Fox Hollies Road, Acox Green, Birmingham, B27 7PS. The purpose of the report is to consider representations that have been made in respect of an application for a premises licence which seeks to permit the provision of late night refreshment for consumption both on and off the premises to operate from 11 p.m. until 3 a.m. Monday to Sunday. The premises is to remain open to the public from 12 midday until 3 a.m. Monday to Sunday. A representation has been received from Environmental Health as a responsible authority, which is attached at Appendix 1. Representations have been received from other persons, which are attached at Appendices 2 to 4. The application is attached at Appendix 5, and the site location plans are attached at Appendix 6. When carrying out its licensing functions, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council's Statement of Licensing Policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003. The licensing authority is also required to take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. The options available to the subcommittee today are to grant the licence in accordance with the application, to reject the application, to grant the licence subject to conditions modified to such an extent as considered appropriate, or exclude from the licence any other licensable activities to which the application relates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bapinda. Would the applicant or their representative like to make their representation now, please?
Yes, thanks. The applicant's offered additional conditions that have been submitted to all parties, we understand, and it's been received by them. So I won't repeat those additional conditions here. As regards representation number 1, this confirms other premises in the area have late night refreshments until midnight, and one has until 1 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays. Planning is not, we understand, relevant to licensing applications. Planning was granted in 2003, we understand, so applicant would have been unaware of that when he took over the premises in 2019 of the actual conditions that have not been discharged. But that can all be sorted out with the planning department should the licence be granted, and also even if the licence isn't granted, it needs to be looked into as to what the situation with planning is. I'm not 100% sure of what the situation with planning department is. As regards Rep 2, this is based on public nuisance. We hope the additional conditions offered will alleviate concerns. With no members of the public admitted after midnight and delivery drivers' behaviour, we understand, it's been brought up before, that you can control these drivers by barring them from your premises with the third-party deliverers like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, etc. Just Eats. As we understand it, they can be barred if they present any difficulties or don't do as instructed as per the conditions, additional conditions, etc. submitted. I'll try not to go too fast. Therefore, no slamming of doors or raised voices or increased litter in the small hours, which was of concern. Representation 3, I think we've addressed that in the conditions and what we've said as regards representation 2. Representation 4, crime and disorder is mentioned, but it is notable that there doesn't seem to be a police objection here today. And additional conditions can prevent the public nuisance. Representative 4 confirms already parade the premises and being confirmed open to midnight, and it states it works well closing at midnight. We hope the committee can see fit to grant the licence with the additional conditions offered. Applicant will have adequate bins and regular ongoing lift patrols in the vicinity during all licensable hours. Hopefully the many conditions are acceptable, and we think with the additional conditions, which has been agreed with other, most of that's been agreed with other environmental health officers, not necessarily in Birmingham, but elsewhere. And although it's judged on its own merits, we know, but we have had licences granted with less conditions in Birmingham and for longer hours. Pizza Go-Go, we understand that he's not here to say. We must apologise for that, but we were in contact several times last week, and I did have an email saying the situation deteriorated, but there's a lesson learned from me that to make sure applicants available in this country, I think for further, we decided to go ahead because we were in contact with him, and that's all gone. I've tried several times this morning. So Pizza Go-Go, we understand it's quite a big concern, quite a few shops, premises throughout the country. It's a franchise, and we're not aware of them being a nuisance, even though a lot of them trade to early hours in the morning. So that's all we've got to say on that, really, and thank you for the time to listen to that.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. So as there are no further submissions on behalf of the applicant, we'll go straight into members' questions. Are there any questions from members?
No,
Yes,
for me,
Chair.
Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor.
Can I just ask, does the applicant have previous experience in running such an establishment?
Well, this is what we were supposed to go through this morning, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to contact him as regards that. But he has been accepted as a franchisee of a large company, so I don't think they would put anybody in who they thought was going to make a mess of it, really. But Pizza Go-Go do quite a lot of stores throughout the country. You might have seen their lorries, so I think they would have, had to pay for a franchise, don't you, and operate according to the franchise rules.
Also, with litter, how will that be dealt with? I know you said it'd been, will there be trade waste bin and collections of litter and clearing up?
Yeah, he has to have a trade waste bin and ongoing, sort of every half hour or so, and there's little patrols around the vicinity. Also, a A4 notice go up to say, please do not, dispose of litter appropriately in appropriate bins, and obviously no litter after midnight, as it would be delivery only service, but ongoing during the day anyway, to have a litter patrols, look around the area on an ongoing basis.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Locke. Any further questions from members? No, we don't seem to have any further questions, so I'll move on now to representations. Can those making representations please present their case now? And we'll start off with the Environmental Health Officer, Peter Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can all hear me okay.
Yes, yes.
Environmental health principal objection to the application is in respect of the hours and not in respect of the activity itself. There are other food premises in the area, as Mr. Jordan alluded to or stated. The hours for those premises, I'll just go through these. The dessert shop immediately next door closes at 11 weekdays and then 1 o'clock on Friday, Saturdays and Sundays. And a Pizza Millenio, a few doors down, closes at 1 on Fridays and Saturdays and midnight other days. And there are Dixie Chicken shuts at midnight 7 days a week. The Fish Bar shuts at 9 o'clock. And these are all local businesses immediately near to a Pizza Go-Go and a Chinese restaurant over the road, Chinese takeaway over the road, shuts at 10:30 7 days a week. So the nature and character of the area here is commercial for sure, with a number of food premises, but it's also residential. And our concern is that in this residential area, which includes premises above the shops and a purpose-built block of flats 2 or 3 doors away, is that the late night activity is going to affect the amenity of the residents adversely, and that is the nature of our objection. Now, in terms of the hours, the planning application that was granted in 2003 had a number of conditions attached, one of which was related to the hours of opening, and those permitted hours were I think 11. I had it written down. 11 o'clock weekdays and weekends, and 10:30 on Sundays. Now this was 20 years ago nearly, and the times have changed, and nighttime activity has become a little later. But nevertheless, what we refer to environmental health as creep, which is the incremental change in hours, which insignificantly seem insignificant as individual changes, gradually over time build up into a significant change. And whereas the Planning Committee in 2003 saw fit to restrict the hours for the purposes of the protection of amenity, and that was stated in the reasons given for the condition, there has been creep since then, and the premises are now allowed to open until 1 o'clock. This latest application is going to extend those hours still further, so we're going to get further instances of creep, and other premises are likely to try and follow the lead of Pizza Go-Go, and this will result in an adverse effect on the amenity of local residents. I've had a look at the history, the environmental health history of the premises, and there is no significant history of complaints about the premises. So we have no objection in principle to the premises being open as a pizza takeaway and restaurant. We only object in terms of the hours. I'm just looking through my notes here. There are 1 or 2 other conditions attached to the planning application, which we can come to. It's worth touching on them briefly now anyway. One of them related to the ventilation and extraction from the restaurant. There was a condition attached that a scheme of ventilation, this is normal for environmental health, a scheme of ventilation and odour control from the premises should be submitted. That never was, so that's an undischarged condition. There was also a condition attached, again, a normal environmental health condition relating to noise insulation between the commercial side of the premises and the residential side of the premises and any adjacent premises, and that also is undischarged. So the work may have been done, but it's unlikely, and it's not been demonstrated to have been done. If the applicant was to resubmit this application with hours that correspond broadly to the hours already in existence for the nearby food premises. For instance, midnight, maybe 1 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. Environmental Health would be unlikely to object. But we would still want the issue of odour control and noise insulation addressed. And if that was not addressed via the planning process, in view of the fact that the permission is now nearly 20 years old, we would hope that it could be addressed through the licensing as a licensing conditions. And that pretty much summarises the environmental health position, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members?
No questions.
Okay.
No, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to Councillor Roger Harmer.
Thank you, Chair. My comments would be largely to support what you've just heard from Environmental Health and just completely endorse what they're saying. I would make two further specific emphases within that. One is, what's being talked about here is actually, I wouldn't describe it as a creep in terms of extension of hours. It's a jump. Most 5 days a week, it's an extra 3 hours. And at the weekend, it's an extra 2 hours right through the small hours of the night. So this is a very significant change. And that I would also emphasise that this is a quite significantly residential area with flats, purpose-built flats above all the shops here, and as the officer pointed out, a block of flats itself just a few doors down, and that this is going to cause significant impact on those people, and once we can also expect that if this were to be granted, it's quite likely other shops would then ask for it. So you could end up with several of these premises open in the morning or similar. And there are alternative places, in the city, in this part of the city, without such a big residential population around, where delivery services can be operated from. So it doesn't, it's not that it's here or nowhere. You can deliver from premises that aren't so intimately close to a significant residential population, and that's what the applicant wants to do. That's what I would encourage them to do. I agree with Environmental Health. I have no objection to this in principle. Up to the hours that the other similar premises in the area operate on. It's the extension to 3 o'clock in the morning that I have a very strong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harmer. Any questions from members?
No questions, Chair.
No, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll move on to Councillor John O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to necessarily rehearse the same comments made by gentlemen from Environmental Health or from Councillor Harmer. I support what both of them have said. I would stress that I would also expect that if this is granted, this will drive a wedge in there, and we will have other premises offer or request the same sort of opening hours. As has been pointed out, all these shops have at least one layer of flats above them. There's a neighbouring block a couple of doors down that has 3 floors above the ground floor shops, and there's planning permission in place for a further block of flats just behind that one. So this is quite a significantly dense residential area. I thank the applicant for their proposed conditions, but many of them would seem to be the standard expectation of any business operation to not cause a potentially legally actionable nuisance to their neighbours. This is a commercial area, but it's not one with a developed late night economy, and I don't think it should be allowed to develop as one. And I question, are the conditions that the licensing committee is able to actually impose, or are they more properly dealt with by planning? And if they are accepted, what's the method of enforcement should they be breached? Planning is not a rapid response to problems where we have disruption, and residents could face literally months or more likely years of issues while it's resolved. I'm afraid to have to say that I have no confidence that the additional proposals put forward would deal with my concerns and those of the residents. And I'm concerned that there are undischarged planning conditions regarding this matter, and that will again raise concerns whether any conditions would be actually followed and adhered to, and that we have limited information about this applicant's competence to run this operation or his ability to meet the promises made on his behalf. Finally, I am confident that limiting the opening hours to those matching other premises in the area would deal with these concerns, and I submit to the committee that to protect my residents, the application for a licence till 3 p.m. 3 a.m. should be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Shea. Are there any questions from members?
No questions, Chair.
No, thanks, Chair.
I've got Peter Brown who'd like to comment on the proposed conditions.
Thank you, Chair. From an environmental health viewpoint, if there are subsequent problems with these premises, and I'm not suggesting that that's likely to be the case, but it's possible, it would be environmental health that would be required to investigate and to take action in respect of nuisance. In legal terms, nuisance has quite a specific meaning. It doesn't just mean being irritated or being able to hear something. So by offering conditions such as ensuring that no nuisance is caused, for instance, I'm looking at condition 7 at the moment, the applicant or the premises licence holder is in no position to enforce that condition or to ensure that that condition is enforced. There are other conditions in there. There are 1 or 2 conditions in there that are enforceable, but for the most part, they're not. I'm just looking through them now, at all times delivery drivers shall behave in such a manner. It's not possible to impose how delivery drivers behave. What is possible is to ensure that delivery drivers are told that they must keep quiet and, for instance, banned from the premises if they don't keep quiet or if they persist in causing a problem. That would be enforceable by the premises licence holder. To ensure that nuisance is not caused within someone else's residential premises, how would the premises licence holder ever even know that unless they went into the premises? And even if they did, they're not qualified to say whether something's a nuisance or not, merely whether it's audible or not. And I suspect that with some of these conditions, if you give 2 different people the option of saying whether something is a nuisance or not, you probably get 2 different answers. And it is quite difficult to be objective in terms of nuisance, which is probably why environmental health are, for the most part, tasked with deciding on these matters. It is possible to apply additional conditions, and with the cooperation of the applicant, environmental health and the applicant together would be able to come up with a number of conditions that would be applicable and would be enforceable. And we'd be happy to do that. We'd like to keep it simple as much as possible. The easier conditions are, the more likely they are to be complied with. And we have examples of that already in Birmingham, where we have asked for additional conditions. And, you know, for the most part, if we don't get complaints about premises, then, you know, it looks like we've done the right thing. Again, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do we have any further questions from members before we move on to closing submissions?
No, thanks, Chair.
No,
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we'll now take closing submissions in reverse order. So do those making representations wish to make a closing submission? I'll start with Councillor John O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. I don't wish to add any to my statement I've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roger Harmer.
No further comments, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And Environmental Health Officer Peter Brown.
No further comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant or their representative wish to make a closing submission now, please? So, Robert Jordan.
Yes. I'll be quite brief. The conditions, we would say we take on board the environmental health comments, but majority of these conditions were drawn up by other applications put in other boroughs by some environmental health officers. So there's obviously, wherever you go, everybody has a different set of conditions that they say is enforceable or not enforceable. But I would point out that the performance of drivers can be monitored, and if complaints are received, it is possible to bar the delivery driver from coming to the store again. So the delivery drivers, if they're told that in the training, which they would be, are unlikely to cause a disturbance through fear of losing that fee. So these are, condition 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are conditions that are more or less exactly the same as conditions that environmental health officers acting as responsible authorities have asked for. So there's always a difference of opinion there. I think that's all we would make on that, but I do respect the environmental health officer, his opinion. But they do differ among other environmental health officers, what's enforceable as to what's not. So I think I need to address that. As regards planning, this was in 2003. As we understand it, and we've always been told at every hearing we go to, that planning is not relevant to licensing applications. But just to say that obviously my client took over the premises in 2019 as a franchise, as a major operator, it would appear, Pizza Go-Go. And he wouldn't have been aware of those, but he's happy. I did maybe speak to him briefly about that. He was happy to sort of put those things correct, so he hadn't heard of those things, and I've got to really explain that to him, what needs to be done. I don't want to say any more about that, but I think, just thanks for the time to put his case. Pity can't be here, learned a lesson from that in future. Okay, that's all we're going to say on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I will now ask all parties to leave the Microsoft Teams meeting, and the members, the committee lawyer and the committee manager will go into private session while the subcommittee makes its decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Robert Jordan, PR